each night we travel together into realms of peace and possibility. I'm your guide, Elara, and tonight I'm especially grateful you've chosen to join me on this journey of rest and renewal. As I was walking through the garden earlier today, I noticed how the late afternoon sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns of shadow and light that seemed almost magical. It reminded me that magic isn't always grand or obvious. Sometimes it's in the quiet moments, the gentle transformations that happen when we simply pay attention. That reflection inspired tonight's journey. Tonight, we'll be wandering through ancient paths seldom travelled, discovering forgotten wisdom and exploring the power of transformation that exists within the quietest moments. Our journey will take us deep into realms where reality and dreams intertwine, where what we seek has perhaps been waiting for us all along. The path may seem mysterious at first, but I promise that each step will bring you deeper into comfort and peace. There's something profound about the idea of transformation, how we can change not only our circumstances, but our perception of the world around us. Tonight's story explores how the magic we seek often resides within ourselves, waiting to be awakened through patience, curiosity, and openness. The most powerful spells aren't always spoken with words, but felt with the heart. So find a comfortable position where your body can fully relax. Adjust your pillows, settle your blankets, and allow yourself to be fully supported. As you close your eyes, begin to let go of the day behind you, knowing that this time is yours, a gift of rest you've given yourself. Let's begin our journey together into sleep, into dreams, into the gentle magic that awaits. As you prepare to drift into tonight's story, I invite you to bring your awareness to your body and the space around you. Notice how your body makes contact with the surface beneath you, perhaps your bed, a couch, or your favourite chair. Feel the points where you are supported, where weight and pressure meet softness and stability. You might recognise in yourself that feeling we all experience sometimes, of carrying invisible burdens through your day, the weight of responsibilities, concerns, plans, and to-do lists, like an alchemist carrying a satchel filled with various ingredients and tools. We often don't realise how much we're holding until we set it down. Tonight, you have permission to set it all down. Let's begin to relax your body completely, starting with your feet. Bring your awareness to your toes and the soles of your feet. You might gently flex your feet and then release, feeling any tension begin to dissolve. Imagine a warm, gentle light slowly filling your feet, bringing comfort and ease to every muscle and tendon. This warmth gradually rises to your ankles, softening and relaxing them completely. This gentle wave of relaxation continues upward, flowing into your calves. You might notice any tightness or tension there beginning to melt away, like ice under the warm spring sun. The muscles become soft, heavy, and completely at ease. This soothing sensation travels to your knees now, relaxing the joints and all the small muscles around them. Your thighs now fill with this peaceful warmth, becoming heavy and comfortable. Any tension or tightness dissolves completely as your legs become thoroughly relaxed. This wave of comfort flows up into your hips, releasing any pressure or strain that might have accumulated there during the day. Your lower body now feels pleasantly heavy, warm, and completely at ease. The relaxation continues to flow upward into your abdomen and lower back. With each breath, feel these areas softening and expanding. is deep and natural, bringing fresh energy to your body with each inhale and carrying away any remaining tension with each exhale. Your breathing finds its own gentle rhythm. Inhale slowly, allowing your lungs to fill completely. Hold that breath for just a moment. And exhale deeply, releasing all tension. Again, breathe in fully, expanding your chest, and breathe out completely, letting go. One more time. Inhale slowly, feeling the cool air entering your body, and exhale warmly, feeling your body becoming even heavier and more relaxed. This wave of relaxation now flows into your chest and upper back, releasing any tightness around your heart and between your shoulder blades. Your heartbeat becomes calm and steady, like gentle waves on a peaceful shore. The muscles across your chest and back soften and release completely. Now bring your attention to your shoulders, where we often carry so much tension. Allow them to drop away from your ears, becoming heavy and loose. Any tightness in your shoulders now melts away completely. This relaxation flows down your arms, through your elbows, into your wrists and hands. Your fingers become loose and relaxed, perhaps slightly tingling with comfort. Finally, this wave of relaxation rises into your neck, dissolving any stiffness that might have collected there. The back of your neck lengthens and softens. This soothing sensation continues upward, relaxing your scalp, your forehead, the muscles around your eyes and jaw. Your face becomes soft and serene, your jaw slightly open, your tongue resting comfortably. Your entire body is now deeply relaxed, comfortable, and heavy. You're perfectly supported, with nothing to do and nowhere to go. Just this moment of complete ease. As you rest in this peaceful state, begin to visualize yourself at the edge of an ancient forest. The day is warm but not hot, with soft, dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy of leaves above. The light plays on the ground in patterns of gold and green, creating a gentle, almost hypnotic effect. The forest before you seems to breathe with a quiet, ancient rhythm. Listen to the subtle symphony of sounds around you. There's the soft rustling of leaves in a gentle breeze, creating a soothing whisper overhead. From deeper in the forest comes the occasional melodic call of birds, their songs clear and sweet in the quiet air. Perhaps you can hear the distant murmur of a stream, its water flowing over smooth stones, creating a continuous, gentle melody. Your body feels wonderfully comfortable in this environment. The temperature is perfect. Warm sunshine occasionally touching your skin through the leaves, balanced by cool, refreshing breezes. The ground beneath your feet feels slightly springy, cushioned with decades of fallen leaves, now turned to rich, soft earth. There's a pleasant heaviness to your limbs, as if the peaceful atmosphere of the forest is inviting you to slow down, to move with deliberate ease. The air here carries scents that seem to awaken ancient memories. There's the rich, earthy aroma of soil and growing things, the sweet perfume of unseen flowers, and the fresh, clean scent of sun-warmed pine. With each breath, you might detect subtle new fragrances, perhaps a hint of wild herbs or the slightly sweet smell of sun-ripened berries. The air itself feels nourishing to breathe, filling your lungs with vitality and peace. As you stand at the threshold of this forest, you might sense that places like this have always held special meaning for humans. Throughout time, forests have represented the unknown, the magical, the transformative. They are places where people have gone to seek wisdom, to find themselves, to be changed. There's something in their quiet depth that speaks to something deep within us. A reminder that there are still mysteries in the world, still magic to be discovered. You're perfectly safe here at the edge of this forest. You're exactly where you're meant to be. There's no rush, no pressure, only invitation. Your curiosity and openness will guide you forward when you're ready. Your body knows how to relax, your mind knows how to drift, and your spirit knows how to dream. You have permission to experience this journey in whatever way feels right to you. As we transition now into tonight's story, allow yourself to become even more comfortable. Perhaps you shift slightly to settle more deeply into your resting place. Feel yourself becoming heavier, your breathing slower and deeper. The boundary between your conscious mind and your dreaming mind begins to soften as we follow the path into the forest, into our tale, into rest. In a small cottage at the edge of the old forbidden forest lived Elara, an alchemist whose reputation had faded with the passing years. Time had silvered her once dark hair and etched fine lines around her eyes, but it had done nothing to dim the sharp intelligence in her gaze or the graceful precision of her hands. Her cottage was a testament to a life devoted to her craft. Shelves lined with glass bottles containing powders and liquids of every colour, bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, and curious instruments of brass and copper catching the light from the windows. Elara's days followed a gentle rhythm that had become as familiar and comfortable as her favourite shawl. She would wake with the first light of dawn, the soft golden glow filtering through her east-facing windows and warming her face. The morning air would be cool and fresh, carrying the scent of dew-dampened earth and the distant perfume of forest flowers. She would stretch slowly, feeling the pleasant weight of her blankets and the softness of her pillow before finally rising to greet the day. Her mornings were devoted to tending her garden, where she grew the herbs and flowers needed for her alchemical preparations. The garden was a place of order and beauty, with stone pathways winding between carefully tended beds. Lavender and rosemary released their fragrance as her skirt brushed against them. Calendula turned their bright faces to the sun, while delicate mints sent their roots creeping beneath the soil. Elara would move through the garden with unhurried purpose, a worn basket over her arm, selecting leaves and blossoms with knowing fingers, murmuring quiet words of thanks to each plant that offered its gifts. The afternoons found her at a spindisme workbench inside the cottage, where the air was perfumed with the mingled scents of her morning harvest and the subtle fragrances of her alchemical work. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating motes of dust that danced in the air like tiny stars. The room was pleasantly warm, the silence broken only by the occasional bubble and hiss from a gently heating mixture, the soft clink of glass against metal, or the whisper of pages turning in one of her reference books. During these quiet hours of work, Elara would often reflect on the nature of alchemy itself. So many misunderstood her craft, believing it was merely about turning base metals into gold or creating elixirs of immortality. But Elara knew the deeper truth, that true alchemy was about transformation on every level, about understanding the essential nature of things and helping them become their truest, most perfect selves. It was patient, gentle work, requiring both precision and intuition, knowledge and faith. The villagers who occasionally came to her door seeking remedies for their ailments or solutions to their problems didn't understand this help their crops grow. But Elindra didn't mind. She was content in her quiet practice, finding satisfaction in this small transformation she could create, the subtle ways she could bring more harmony into the world. As evening approached each day, Elindra would prepare a simple meal, often featuring herbs from her garden and mushrooms she had carefully collected from the edge of the forest. She would eat at her small table by the window, watching as the light changed, turning the world golden, then amber, then dusky blue. After dinner, she would sit in her comfortable chair by the hearth, a cup of fragrant tea cooling on the table beside her, and read from one of her many books until her eyes grew heavy and the fire burned low. This had been her life for many years, and she had found deep contentment in its gentle rhythms and quiet purpose. Yet sometimes, in those drowsy moments between wakefulness and sleep, Elindra would feel a whisper of something just beyond her understanding, a sense that there was more to discover, deeper transformations to explore, greater wonders waiting to be revealed. In these moments, her eyes would drift to her cottage window and the dark line of the forbidden forest beyond, mysterious and ancient, stirring something in her that she couldn't quite name. Tomorrow, she would think, as sleep began to claim her. Perhaps tomorrow I'll venture just a little deeper into the forest. But when morning came, there were always herbs to harvest, preparations to attend to, villagers seeking her help. And so, the days passed, one flowing gently into the next, like water in a peaceful stream. One morning, as summer was beginning to whisper hints of autumn, Elindra woke to a different quality of light filtering through her window. The air felt charged somehow, as if a storm were approaching, though the sky outside remained clear and blue. As she moved through her familiar morning routine, washing her face in cool water, combing her silver hair, preparing a simple breakfast of bread and honey, she found herself repeatedly drawn to the window that faced the forbidden forest. The forest seemed different today. The usual green darkness of its depths appeared to pulse with subtle currents of energy, like the slow breathing of some great, sleeping creature. The leaves at the forest edge trembled, though there was no wind. Elindra felt a corresponding tremor in her own body, a gentle flutter beneath her breastbone, like recognition. "Well," she said to the empty room, her voice soft in the morning quiet, "it seems today might be different after all." After breakfast, instead of going to her garden as usual, Elindra found herself preparing as if for a journey. She selected a sturdy leather satchel from a hook by the door and began to fill it with items that might be useful. A small knife with a bone handle, a pouch of salt, a vial of clear liquid that caught the light like diamonds, a bundle of dried herbs tied with blue thread, a small brass compass that had belonged to her grandmother, and several pieces of soft cloth for gathering specimens. She added a flask of fresh water and some bread and cheese wrapped in waxed cloth. As she worked, her movements were calm and deliberate, her breathing slow and even. There was no hurry, no anxiety, only a sense of rightness, of following a path that had always been waiting for her. She hummed softly under her breath, an old melody her mother used to sing, the sound filling the cottage with gentle warmth. When her preparations were complete, Elindra paused to look around her home, the familiar space where she had spent so many peaceful days. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes in the air and turning them to gold. The scent of dried herbs and warm wood filled her nostrils. She took a deep breath, feeling gratitude oasis of safety and creativity, and then turned to the door. Outside, the day had warmed. The sun was a golden presence overhead, casting dappled shadows through the leaves of the apple tree in her yard. Birds called from the garden, their voices sweet and clear in the still air. Elindra stood for a moment, feeling the warm solidity of the earth beneath her feet, the gentle pressure of her satchel against her hip, the slight weight of her shawl around her shoulders. With steady steps, she began to walk toward the forbidden forest. As she approached, the sounds of her garden, the buzzing of bees, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of farmyard animals from the village, gradually faded, replaced by a deep, waiting silence. The temperature dropped slightly, a cool breath against her skin. The light changed, becoming greener, more diffuse. At the very edge of the forest, Elindra paused again. Ancient trees towered above her, their trunks wider than her cottage door, their branches reaching up and out to form a dense canopy overhead. Moss covered their roots and crept up their sides, soft and velvety. The forest floor was a tapestry of ferns, fallen leaves, and small, pale flowers that seemed to glow in the dim light. Elindra took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the rich scent of earth and growing things. She felt a momentary hesitation, a small flutter of uncertainty. The forbidden forest had earned its name through generations of stories, tales of people who had entered and never returned, of strange lights seen dancing among the trees at night, of voices that called to travellers and led them astray. But Elindra was not just any traveller. She was an alchemist, trained to observe, to understand, to transform. She knew how to see beyond appearances to the essential nature of things, and something in this forest was calling to her, not with a voice that could be heard with the ears, but with a resonance she felt in her very bones. "I hear you," she whispered to the forest. "I'm coming." And with that, she stepped forward, crossing the threshold between the known and the unknown, the familiar and the mysterious. The forest seemed to sigh around her, branches shifting slightly overhead, allowing a single beam of sunlight to fall across her path like a welcome. Elindra followed no obvious trail as she moved deeper into the forest. Instead, she allowed herself to be guided by subtle cues, a gap between two ancient trees that seemed to invite passage, a patch of lighter green ahead that suggested a small clearing, the occasional flash of movement that might have been a bird or small animal showing the way. She walked with careful attention, her steps light on the forest floor, her senses open to everything around her. The forest grew thicker the deeper she ventured, the trees standing closer together, their massive roots creating natural steps and barriers that she navigated with patient care. The canopy overhead became denser as well, filtering the sunlight into a green-gold glow that seemed to float in the air like dust. Occasionally, a shaft of pure sunlight would break through, illuminating a patch of forest floor with sudden brilliance, revealing the intricate patterns of ferns and fungi, the delicate structures of fallen leaves, the busy society of insects going about their work. The air here had a different quality than in her garden or even at the forest edge. It was cooler, damper, and filled with a complex symphony of scents: rich earth, decaying wood, mushrooms, moss, the green sharpness of ferns, and occasionally the surprising sweetness of hidden flowers. Elindra breathed deeply, letting these fragrances tell her stories about the forest's health and history. As she walked, she began to notice patterns in the seemingly wild growth around her. Certain plants grew in relationship to others, supporting each other in subtle ways. Fungi created networks connecting distant trees, allowing them to communicate and share resources. What had at first appeared as chaos revealed itself, with patient observation, to be an intricate, interconnected system where each element had its place and purpose. Just like alchemy, Elindra murmured to herself, her voice soft in the forest. Quiet. Everything connected. Everything in relationship. Everything in the process of becoming. After what might have been hours or merely moments, time seemed to flow differently here in the green heart of the forest. Elindra came upon a small stream cutting through the forest floor. The water was crystal clear, flowing over smooth stones in a gentle, musical pattern. Sunlight, breaking through a gap in the canopy overhead, struck the moving water and scattered into thousands of tiny rainbows. Elindra knelt beside the stream, setting her satchel carefully on a moss-covered rock. The ground was soft beneath, her knees cushioned with decades of fallen leaves, now transformed into rich soil. She cupped her hands and dipped them into the water, which was cool and sweet against her skin. Bringing the water to her lips, she drank, feeling its coolness travel down her throat and into her body, refreshing her after her walk. As she rested by the stream, Elindra became aware of being watched. The sensation was not threatening, merely curious. Slowly, so as not to startle whatever presence she was sensing, she raised her head and looked across the stream. There, half hidden among the ferns on the opposite bank, stood a fox. Its coat was the deep, rich red of autumn leaves, its eyes bright and intelligent as they regarded her with unmistakable awareness. "Hello, friend," Elindra said softly, remaining very still. "Thank you for showing yourself to me." The fox tilted its head slightly, as if considering her words. Then, with deliberate movements, it turned and began to walk along the stream bank, pausing after a few steps to look back at her. The message was clear as any spoken word. "Follow." Elindra gathered her satchel and rose to her feet, her joints slightly stiff from kneeling. The fox waited until she had crossed the stream, stepping carefully from stone to stone, the cool water occasionally splashing against her ankles. On the other side, she paused, allowing the fox to lead the way along a narrow path that she hadn't noticed before. The path wound through increasingly ancient parts of the forest. The trees here were giants, their trunks wider than 3 people could encircle with joined hands, their bark deeply furrowed and draped with curtains of pale green lichen. Their roots created a complex landscape of rises and dips, natural steps and hidden hollows. The forest floor was sparsely covered with shade-loving plants, delicate ferns, patches of emerald moss, and occasionally small white flowers that seemed to glow with their own light. As they travelled, the fox maintained a consistent distance ahead of her, close enough that she could always see its russet form moving through the undergrowth, but never so close that she could reach out and touch it. It moved with fluid grace, sometimes glancing back to ensure she was following, its bright eyes reflecting the dappled forest light. The air grew noticeably cooler, and Elindra drew her shawl more closely around her shoulders. The quality of light was changing too, taking on the golden hue of late afternoon. She had been walking for hours, yet she felt no fatigue, no hunger, no thirst, only a growing sense of anticipation, as if she were approaching something significant. Finally, the fox led her to a clearing in the forest. Here, the ancient trees formed a perfect perfect circle around a small meadow filled with tall grass and wildflowers that swayed gently in a breeze she hadn't felt until now. In the centre of this clearing stood a single tree unlike any Elara had ever seen. Its trunk was silver white, smooth and unmarked by age. Its branches spread out in a perfectly balanced crown, covered with leaves that seemed to shift colour as they moved, now silver, now blue, now a pale luminous gold. At the base of this remarkable tree was a hollow, partially hidden by exposed roots that arched like doorways. The fox walked directly to this hollow, and then, with one last look at Elara, slipped inside and disappeared from view. Elara stood at the edge of the clearing, taking in the scene before her. The meadow grasses brushed against her legs, their touch soft and ticklish. The scent of unknown flowers filled the air, sweet and slightly spicy. The tree at the centre seemed to pulse with a gentle light that came from within, rather than reflecting from without. And all around, the forest was utterly still, as if holding its breath in anticipation. With slow, deliberate steps, Elara crossed the meadow toward the silver tree. The grass parted easily before her, seeming almost to point the way forward. As she drew closer to the tree, she felt a subtle vibration in the air, a gentle humming that she sensed rather than heard. It reminded her of the feeling in her workroom when a particularly complex alchemical process was reaching its completion, a moment of perfect balance just before transformation. When she reached the tree, she placed her palm against its trunk. The bark was warm and smooth beneath her hand, almost like living silk. She could feel a pulse within it, slow and steady, like a sleeping heart. The vibration she had sensed in the air was stronger here, flowing through her palm and up her arm, resonating in her chest. "What secrets do you hold?" she whispered to the tree, her voice soft with wonder. As if in answer, a stronger breeze swept through the clearing, causing the tree's leaves to rustle in a sound like distant silver bells. The hollow at the base of the tree seemed to deepen, shadows gathering within it, forming what looked very much like a doorway. Elara knelt before this entrance, setting her satchel aside. The roots of the tree arched overhead, creating a natural threshold. Beyond was darkness, but not the fearful darkness of the unknown, rather the inviting darkness of a sanctuary, a place of rest and revelation. She hesitated only briefly before bending down and crawling through the opening. The space within was larger than it had appeared from outside, a rounded chamber within the heart of the tree, high enough that she could stand comfortably once inside. The walls glowed with a soft blue-silver light that seemed to come from the wood itself, illuminating the space with gentle radiance. And there, in the centre of this hidden chamber, resting on a root that had grown into the perfect form of a pedestal, was a book. The book rested in a pool of silvery light, as if the tree itself were directing Elara's attention to this singular object. It was not large, perhaps the size of her two hands placed side by side, and bound in what appeared to be very old leather, darkened with age. There was no title on its cover, no indication of its contents or origin, only a simple pattern tooled into the leather, a spiral that began at the centre and worked its way outward in ever-widening circles. Elara approached slowly, her footsteps silent on the smooth earthen floor of the chamber. The air here was still and cool, with a faint scent that reminded her of old parchment, forest rain, and something else, something ancient and not quite identifiable. Her heart beat slightly, though not with fear. Rather, she felt a deep sense of recognition, as if she had been searching for this book her entire life without knowing it. Standing before the pedestal, Elindra studied the book without touching it. The leather binding was cracked in places, showing its age, yet it seemed perfectly preserved. The spiral on the cover caught the light strangely, seeming to shift and move. Although the book remained perfectly still, there was a presence about the book, an aura of contained power that reminded Elindra of certain rare ingredients she used in her most complex alchemical works, elements that required the utmost respect and care in handling. "Who left you here?" she whispered to the book. "And why have you called to me?" The chamber seemed to grow quieter, as if the very air were listening. The glow from the walls pulsed once, brightening momentarily before returning to its steady radiance. Elindra took this as encouragement. With careful movements, she reached out and placed her fingertips lightly on the book's cover. The leather was warm to the touch, warmer than it should have been in this cool underground space. It seemed to vibrate slightly beneath her fingers, like a living thing responding to her presence. She felt a tingling sensation travel up her arms and settle in her chest. Not unpleasant, but certainly unusual. Drawing a deep breath to steady herself, Elindra gently lifted the book from its resting place. It was lighter than she had expected, seeming almost to float upward into her hands. She cradled it carefully, feeling its subtle warmth against her palms, and moved to where the light was strongest, beneath an opening in the chamber ceiling where a shaft of late afternoon sunlight streamed down. Settling herself cross-legged on the earth floor, the book resting on her lap, Elindra took another deep breath. The moment felt significant, threshold-like. She was aware of the weight of the book on her thighs, the cool earth beneath her, the gentle play of light and shadow across her hands. Time seemed suspended. The normal flow of moments paused as she sat in this hidden heart of the forest with this mysterious object that had somehow called her here. With reverent care, Elindra opened the book to its first page. The parchment made a soft crackling sound, like distant fire or whispering leaves. The page was covered with writing in a script she had never seen before, elegant, flowing characters that seemed to shift slightly as she looked at them, as if reluctant to be pinned down by the eye. Yet, strangely, as she continued to study the page, the unfamiliar script began to resolve itself into words she could understand. It was as if the book were translating itself for her, or perhaps awakening some dormant knowledge within her mind. The sensation was disconcerting, but not frightening, similar to the moment in alchemical work when a solution suddenly clears, revealing the answer that had been present all along. The Book of Transformations, she read aloud, the title appearing now at the top of the first page, being a true account of the essential nature of all things and the methods by which they may be transformed. Her voice echoed slightly in the chamber, the words hanging in the air with almost physical presence. The light around her seemed to intensify, focusing more directly on the open book. Elindra felt a surge of excitement mixed with awe. This was no ordinary text on alchemy. This was something far older, far deeper than any book she had encountered in her decades of study. She turned the page, revealing text interspersed with intricate diagrams, spirals and circles interconnected in complex patterns, illustrations of plants and minerals she recognized alongside others she had never seen, mappings of celestial bodies and their relationships to elements on Earth. The text itself was both straightforward profound and profoundly mysterious, speaking of transformations, not just of matter, but of energy, consciousness, reality itself. As she read, Elindra lost all sense of time. The light in the chamber shifted from the golden hue of afternoon to the deeper orange of evening, but she hardly noticed. She was absorbed completely in the book's contents, recognizing in its pages the answers to questions she had pondered throughout her life as an alchemist, alongside new questions she had never thought to ask. The book spoke of the interconnectedness of all things, how a change in one element necessarily affected all others. It described methods for understanding the essential nature of objects and beings, seeing beyond their temporary forms to the patterns of energy that constituted their true selves. And it outlined practices for gentle, respectful transformation, not forcing change, but inviting it, creating conditions where the innate potential of something could be fully realized. "This is true alchemy," Elindra murmured, her finger tracing a particularly beautiful diagram that showed the relationship between a seed, a tree, and the stars above. Not changing lead to gold, but seeing the gold that exists within all things. She continued to read, page after page, as night fell in the world above. The chamber's walls provided enough light for her to see clearly, their glow adjusting to the absence of sunlight. Outside, the forest settled into its nighttime rhythms, nocturnal creatures awakening, leaves rustling in the evening breeze, stars appearing one by one in the sky above the canopy. But Elindra, absorbed in her reading, was aware only of the book in her lap and the expanding understanding in her mind. Hours passed, perhaps even days. Time had little meaning in the heart of the tree. Elindra read and rested, occasionally closing her eyes to absorb and integrate what she had learned. The book was not organized in the linear fashion of human texts, with a clear beginning, middle, and end. Rather, it seemed to respond to her own thought patterns, presenting information as she was ready to receive it, circling back to earlier concepts with new layers of meaning, creating a web of understanding rather than a straight line. At some point during her reading, Elindra became aware of a presence in the chamber with her. Looking up from the book, she saw the fox sitting nearby, watching her with its bright, intelligent eyes. It showed no surprise at finding her there, no impatience at her extended stay, only a calm interest, as if it had been expecting this all along. "Have you been waiting for me to finish?" Elindra asked, her voice slightly hoarse from disuse. The fox tilted its head, then stood and stretched, its movements fluid and graceful. It walked to the entrance of the chamber and looked back at her expectantly. Elindra glanced down at the book in her lap, reluctant to leave it when there was still so much to learn. Yet, she also felt a sense of completeness, as if the book had shared with her exactly what she needed for now. Without conscious decision, she closed the book and carefully returned it to its pedestal. The leather cover seemed to glow briefly under her fingertips, acknowledging her care. "Thank you," she said to the book, or perhaps to the tree, or to whatever ancient wisdom had created this place. "I will return." Gathering her satchel, Elindra followed the fox out of the chamber, ducking slightly to pass through the root archway. Outside, she was surprised to find that it was early morning. Dew sparkled on the meadow grasses, catching the light of the rising sun and transforming each drop into a tiny rainbow. The air was cool and fresh, filled with the chorus of awakening birds and the sweet scent of morning flowers. The fox led her back through the forest, following a path that seemed both familiar and new. The journey seemed shorter this time, as if the forest were compressing the distance for their return. Elindra walked with a different awareness now, seeing the forest not just with her eyes but with deeper understanding. She could perceive the connections between trees, the communication happening beneath the soil, the perfect balance of giving and receiving that maintained the health of the whole ecosystem. When they reached the stream where she had first encountered the fox, the animal stopped and sat, watching her with what seemed very much like approval. Elindra knelt beside it, close but not touching, respecting its wild nature. "Thank you for guiding me," she said softly. "I would never have found the tree or the book without you." The fox regarded her steadily, its amber eyes reflecting the morning light. Then, with deliberate movement, it leaned forward and touched its nose briefly to her hand, the lightest of contacts, a blessing of sorts. Before Elindra could respond, the fox turned and disappeared into the undergrowth, a flash of russet fur quickly swallowed by the green depths of the forest. Elindra remained kneeling by the stream for several moments, feeling the cool earth beneath her knees, the gentle warmth of the rising sun on her face, the light breeze playing with strands of her silver hair. She felt changed by her encounter with the book, yet not in any way she could easily define. It was as if the world around her had taken on additional dimensions, revealing layers of meaning and connection that had always been present, but that she had never before been able to perceive. With a deep breath, she rose to her feet and continued her journey back to the edge of the forest. The way seemed to open before her, paths appearing where she needed them, obstacles melting away. It was as if the forest itself were escorting her home, acknowledging her as someone who had been initiated into its deeper mysteries. When she finally emerged from the forest edge and saw her small cottage in the distance, bathed in morning light, Elindra felt a surge of affection for this familiar place that had been her home for so many years. It looked both exactly the same and somehow different, smaller perhaps in relation to the vast world she had glimpsed through the book, yet also more precious in its simple solidity. Her garden greeted her with a riot of colour and fragrance, flowers turning their faces to the sun, herbs releasing their scent as her skirt brushed against them. Bees moved busily from blossom to blossom, their gentle humming a counterpoint to the distant songs of birds. Everything was as she had left it, yet she saw it all with new eyes. The delicate balance of soil and water and light, the constant transformations happening beneath the surface, the quiet magic present in even the most ordinary growth. In the days that followed her discovery of the book in the heart of the silver tree, Elindra moved through her familiar routines with a renewed sense of purpose and wonder. The knowledge she had gained continued to unfold within her mind, like a flower slowly opening its petals to the sun. She found herself noticing details she had overlooked before, the precise pattern of veins in a leaf, the specific quality of light at different hours of the day, the subtle changes in the air before rain. Her alchemical work took on new dimensions as well. Where before she had followed recipes passed down through generations, now she began to experiment, guided by the principles she had learned from the book. She found she could achieve transformations with fewer ingredients, gentler processes, and more harmonious results. The villagers who came to her for remedies noticed the difference, commenting on the increased effectiveness of her medicines, the surprising side effects of increased vitality and emotional well-being. Yet Elindra shared nothing of her experience in the forest or the source of her new knowledge. Some things, she understood, were meant to be discovered personally, not transmitted through words. The book had found her because she was ready for its wisdom. Others would find their own paths to similar understanding when the time was right for them. Each day, as she worked in her garden or at her bench, Elindra's thoughts would often drift to the silver tree and the book within it. She could still recall perfectly the feel of the leather binding, the scent of ancient parchment, the glow of the chamber walls. She knew she would return. The book had much more to teach her, but she also knew that the time wasn't right yet. She needed to integrate what she had already learned, to practice the principles in her daily life, to prepare herself for deeper knowledge. One evening, about a month after her forest journey, Elindra sat in her garden as twilight deepened around her. The air was perfectly still, heavy with the scent of night-blooming flowers. The first stars were appearing overhead, pinpoints of light in the darkening blue. She held a cup of herbal tea between her palms, enjoying its warmth and fragrance. From the direction of the forest came the sound of distant bells, or perhaps it was just the wind in the leaves, creating that silvery music she had heard in the clearing. Elindra smiled, raising her cup in a silent toast to the forest and its secrets. There was no rush, no urgency. The book would wait for her, as it had waited perhaps for centuries before she found it. Time moved differently in the heart of the forest, following cycles larger than human understanding. For now, there was this moment, the cooling evening air against her skin, the rich earth beneath her feet, the delicate balance of herbs in her tea, the first cricket beginning its night song in the garden. Each of these simple elements contained its own perfect magic, its own potential for transformation. The true alchemy, as the book had shown her, was in the seeing, the appreciating, the gentle nurturing of what wanted to become. Elindra took another sip of her tea, feeling its warmth travel through her body. Above her, more stars had appeared, creating patterns that had guided human navigation for thousands of years. She remembered a diagram from the book showing the correspondence between stars and elements, between celestial movements and earthly transformations. Everything connected, everything in relationship, everything in the process of becoming. This was the secret knowledge that the forbidden forest had shared with her. Not how to turn lead into gold, but how to see the gold that existed in all things. Not how to force change, but how to create conditions for natural transformation. Not how to conquer nature, but how to listen to it, learn from it, become part of its endless creativity. As darkness settled fully around her, Elindra finished her tea and rose from her garden seat. The day was complete, transitioning naturally into night. Tomorrow would bring new observations, new experiments, new understanding, and someday, when the time was right, a return to the silver tree and the remarkable book that waited within it. For now, there was the gentle rhythm of day following night, the continuous cycle of learning and resting, discovering and integrating. Elindra looked once more toward the dark line of the forest before turning toward her cottage. A single light burned in the window, welcoming her home. She walked toward it with unhurried steps, carrying the forest's gift of wisdom within her, transforming it through understanding into something uniquely her own. As the seasons turned, Elindra continued to deepen her understanding of the principles she had learned from the book in the silver tree. Summer gave way to autumn, painting the ordinary legendary trees of the forest in brilliant colours of red and gold, while the silver tree at its heart, as Elindra discovered on her occasional return visits, remained unchanging, its leaves shimmering with their peculiar light regardless of season. During these return journeys, always guided by the fox who seemed to appear whenever she approached the forest edge, Elindra would spend hours with the book, absorbing new layers of knowledge, asking questions that the text seemed to answer before. She even formed them fully in her mind. Each visit left her changed in subtle ways, her perception expanding, her connection to the natural world deepening. Between these visits, she applied what she learned to her daily practice of alchemy. Her workroom became a place of gentle transformation rather than dramatic change. She found herself using heat more sparingly, stirring mixtures with greater attention to their natural rhythms, allowing ingredients to release their essences in their own time, rather than forcing extraction through harsh methods. The results were remarkable. Her medicines became more effective while producing fewer side effects. Her growing understanding of the essential nature of plants allowed her to use them more specifically, more respectfully. The villagers noticed the difference, and word began to spread beyond her immediate community. People travelled from distant towns to seek her remedies, bringing complex ailments that had resisted conventional treatments. Elindra welcomed them all with the same quiet attention she gave to her garden plants and alchemical preparations. She listened carefully to their descriptions of symptoms, observed the patterns of energy in their bodies, and created individualized treatments that addressed not just the immediate problem, but the underlying imbalances. Many commented that the simple act of sitting in her presence, in a herb-scented cottage with its atmosphere of calm purpose, was itself healing. As her reputation grew, Elindra began to receive visitors of a different sort. Other alchemists, herbalists, and healers who had heard of her work and wished to learn her methods. At first, she was hesitant to share, unsure how to translate the deep knowing she had gained from the book into teachable techniques. How could she explain that her most significant ingredient was patience, that her most valuable tool was attention, that the most important step in her process was listening to what each substance wanted to become? But as autumn deepened toward winter, bringing long evenings conducive to conversation, Elindra gradually found ways to share some aspects of her knowledge. She would invite these serious seekers to join her in simple tasks, sorting herbs, stirring, preparations, observing the subtle colour changes in a heating mixture, using these practical activities as opportunities to demonstrate the principles of attentive presence, respectful handling, and cooperation with natural processes. Some of her visitors quickly became frustrated with what they saw as unnecessarily slow, inefficient methods. They had come expecting secret formulas or dramatic demonstrations of mysterious forces. When Elindra offered instead lessons in quieting the mind and opening the senses, they would often leave after only a day or two, disappointed and slightly contemptuous of what they perceived as primitive techniques. But others stayed longer, beginning to sense the depth beneath the apparent simplicity of Elindra's approach. These few began to notice what she noticed: the specific quality of light at different times of day and how it affected certain preparations, the subtle differences in aroma that indicated an extract had reached perfect potency, the almost imperceptible change in the sound of a simmering mixture when it had achieved ideal integration. To knowledge or the existence of the book in the silver tree. That discovery, she believed, was a personal journey that each seeker needed to make in their own way when they were ready. Winter arrived with short days and long nights, bringing a different rhythm to Elindra's work. The garden rested under a blanket of snow, the plants withdrawing their energy deep into their roots. It was a time for working with dried herbs and preserved ingredients, for slow simmering preparations that filled the cottage with comforting aromas, for studying by candlelight and contemplating the essential patterns underlying outer forms. The forbidden forest, visible from Elindra's window, took on a different aspect in winter. The deciduous trees stood bare, their branches etched black against the snow, while the evergreens maintained their dark green presence. On clear days, the forest looked almost approachable, its secrets exposed by the season's starkness. But on days of snowfall or mist, it receded into mystery again, its boundaries blurring, its depths unknowable. Elindra continued to visit the silver tree throughout winter, finding that the journey through snow-covered forest paths held its own particular beauty. The fox still guided her, its red coat vivid against the white landscape, its paws leaving delicate tracks that she followed with growing familiarity. The tree itself seemed unaffected by winter, its chamber within maintaining the same moderate temperature regardless of the ice and snow outside. It was during one of these winter visits, as Elindra sat with the book in the gently glowing chamber, that she came across a passage she hadn't noticed before, or perhaps it hadn't been ready to reveal itself until now. The text described a process of transformation that could be applied not just to physical substances or living beings, but to communities, to systems of relationship, to patterns of thought and behaviour that had become rigid over time. As she read, Elindra felt a growing excitement. The principles were the same as those she had been applying in her alchemical work, creating conditions conducive to natural change, respecting the essential nature of what was being transformed, working with rather than against inherent patterns. But the scale was vastly different, the potential impact far greater. She thought of the village near her cottage, of the larger towns beyond, of the kingdom itself with its hierarchies and laws and customs. So many of these human systems had become calcified, resistant to change even when they no longer served the well-being of all. Could the gentle, persistent alchemy she had been practicing be applied to these larger structures? Could patterns that had developed over centuries be transformed not through revolution or force, but through the patient nurturing of healthier alternatives? The book seemed to respond to her questions, pages turning to reveal diagrams showing the relationship between individual transformation and collective change, between small, local actions and wider systemic shifts. The text spoke of resonance, of how changes in one part of a system could create harmonious vibrations that gradually affected the whole. It described the importance of timing, of identifying moments when rigid structures were naturally under stress and thus more open to reconfiguration. Elindra read late into the night, the chamber's glow adjusting to provide perfect illumination. As darkness fell in the world above, the fox dozed nearby, occasionally opening one eye to check on her before returning to its dreams. Outside, snow fell silently, covering the forest in a fresh blanket of white, transforming the landscape into something new yet recognisable, much like the process the book was describing. When she finally closed the book and returned it to its pedestal, Elindra felt both energised and peaceful. The The knowledge she had gained opened vast new possibilities, yet it also confirmed what she had always sensed, that true change couldn't be forced or hurried, that it emerged naturally when the conditions were right, that her role was not to control the process, but to understand it deeply enough to work in harmony with it. The fox yawned and stretched as she prepared to leave, then led her back through the snowy forest to its edge. The night was clear now, the snow having stopped while she was reading. Stars blazed overhead in the black winter sky, their light reflecting off the snow to create a landscape of subtle luminescence. Elindra's breath formed clouds in the cold air as she paused at the boundary between forest and field, looking toward her cottage in the distance. A single window glowing with welcome light as winter gradually yielded to spring, bringing longer days and the first green shoots pushing through melting snow. Elindra began to consider how she might apply what she had learned about systemic transformation. The village near her cottage, while generally prosperous and peaceful, had its share of entrenched problems. Long-standing disagreements between certain families, inefficient methods of resource management, traditions that had once served a purpose but had become empty formalities. Rather than addressing these issues directly, which might have provoked resistance, Elindra began with something small and seemingly unrelated. She established a weekly open gathering in her garden as soon as the weather permitted, where anyone from the village could come to share food, conversation, and the simple pleasure of being outdoors among growing things. She made particular effort to invite people from different groups within the village, creating neutral ground where those who might not normally interact could meet informally. At first, attendance was sparse and the conversation awkward, but as spring advanced, bringing warmer days and more abundant growth, the gatherings began to flourish as well. Elindra kept them simple: a fire pit for communal cooking, benches arranged in a circle, flowering plants providing beauty and fragrance. She offered no formal structure, no forced activities, only the invitation to be present together in a pleasant space. Gradually, something began to shift. Conversations that started as polite small talk deepened into more meaningful exchanges. People who had known each other for years discovered aspects of each other they had never seen before. Long-held assumptions began to be questioned, not confrontationally, but with genuine curiosity. And most importantly, connections formed across old dividing lines, between elder and youth, between families with historical differences, between those who typically held power and those who didn't. Elindra observed these changes with quiet satisfaction, seeing in them the principles from the book made manifest, how creating the right conditions could allow natural transformation to occur, how changing the context could shift the pattern of interactions, how new connections could form when rigid boundaries were temporarily suspended. Of course, not everyone participated. Some villagers regarded the gatherings with suspicion, seeing in them a threat to established ways. Others came once or twice but didn't return, uncomfortable with the subtle shifts in familiar dynamics. But enough people engaged consistently that a new pattern began to emerge alongside the old, not replacing it entirely, but offering an alternative, demonstrating other possibilities. As spring progressed into early summer, the effects of these gatherings began to ripple outward. Issues that had been contentious for years were revisited with fresh perspectives. New solutions emerged for old problems, often through casual conversations that began in Elindra's garden. The village council, while still following traditional protocols, developments, hosting the gatherings but rarely directing the conversations that took place there. Her influence was in the setting she created, the tone she established, the connections she quietly encouraged. Like the alchemist she was, she provided the vessel and the conditions, then allowed the natural process of transformation to unfold in its own way, at its own pace. Throughout this time, she continued her regular visits to the silver tree and the book within it. The fox still appeared to guide her, though now she knew the way well enough that she could have found the tree on her own. Still, she welcomed the creature's company, appreciating its silent presence, its occasional glances of what seemed like approval. The book continued to reveal new layers of knowledge, responding to her evolving questions and growing understanding. She learned about the relationship between small-scale, local transformations and larger, systemic changes, how shifts in one area could create resonance in connected systems, how reaching certain thresholds could trigger more widespread transformation, how working at the right leverage points could influence events far beyond the immediate sphere of action. One particular summer evening, as twilight softened the edges of things and filled the air with a golden haze, Elara sat in her garden after a particularly successful gathering. The last visitors had just left, walking back to the village together, in small groups, their voices carrying through the still air, discussing ideas that had emerged during the afternoon. The garden itself seemed to hold the echo of their presence. The benches arranged in conversation groups, the remnants of shared food, the subtle impressions left in the grass where children had played. Elara felt a deep contentment as she surveyed this evidence of community. What had begun as an experiment in applying the book's principles had developed into something valuable in its own right, a regular time and space where people could simply be together without agenda or expectation, where genuine connection could occur naturally. It was a small change in the larger pattern of village life, yet its effects were beginning to spread in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. As darkness deepened and the first stars appeared overhead, Elara became aware of a presence at the edge of her garden. Looking up, she saw the fox sitting near the path that led toward the forest, watching her with its bright, intelligent eyes. It was unusual for the creature to come this close to the village, to appear outside the context of her forest journeys. "Hello, friend," Elara said softly, remaining seated so as not to startle the animal. "What brings you here this evening?" The fox tilted its head, then stood and took a few steps toward the forest, before looking back at her expectantly. The message was clear, just as it had been the first time they met by the stream. Follow. Though the hour was late, and she hadn't planned a forest visit, Elara felt no hesitation. Rising from her seat, she quickly gathered a few essentials: a shawl against the evening cool, a small lantern for the return journey, a flask of water. The fox waited patiently, sitting on its haunches, watching her preparations with what seemed like approval. When she was ready, Elara joined the fox at the garden's edge, and together they set off toward the forbidden forest. The evening was perfect for walking. Not too warm, not too cool, the air still and sweet with the scent of summer flowers. A nearly full moon had risen, casting enough light that Elara barely needed her lantern, though she carried it unlit in her hand for later. The fox led her along familiar paths through the forest, which looked different in the moonlight, more mysterious, more magical. The shadows deeper, the occasional moonlit clearings almost supernaturally bright. Ordinary sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a night bird, details of small creatures seemed heightened, significant. Alindra felt a sense of anticipation building within her, though she had no idea what awaited at the end of this unexpected journey. When they reached the circular clearing with the silver tree at its centre, Alindra initially saw nothing unusual. The tree stood as it always had, luminous in the moonlight, its leaves shifting colour with each gentle breeze. The meadow grasses swayed slightly, creating patterns of movement that the eye could follow into trance-like states. But as she approached the tree, she noticed something different about the hollow at its base. The entrance to the chamber within seemed larger than before, the root archways more defined, as if the tree had intentionally made the way in more accessible, and from within there emanated a soft glow that was stronger than she had seen before, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The fox led her directly to this entrance, and then, with one last glance at her, slipped inside as it had done the first time they visited. Alindra followed, ducking beneath the root archway, expecting to find the chamber as she had left it on her last visit. The pedestal with the book, the glowing walls, the earthen floor. What she found instead took her breath away. The chamber had expanded dramatically, now large enough to hold a dozen people comfortably. The walls still glowed with their blue-silver light, but the illumination was brighter, more dynamic, with patterns of light and shadow playing across the curved surfaces like sunlight through water. The air itself seemed charged with energy, tingling against her skin as she entered fully into the space. And in the centre, where the simple root pedestal had been, now stood a complex structure that reminded Alindra of a small tree, or perhaps a fountain, with multiple levels and branches, extending outward and upward. On each of these extensions rested a book, some large, some small, some ancient-looking, like the one she had been studying, others apparently newer, bound in various materials and colours. The original book, her book as she had come to think of it, occupied a central position, open to a page she had not seen before. As Alindra approached, drawn by both curiosity and a strange sense of homecoming, she saw that the page contained no text, only a beautifully rendered image of a tree, very much like the one she stood within. Beneath the image was a single symbol that she somehow understood to mean completion, or perhaps integration. "What does this mean?" she asked aloud, her voice echoing slightly in the expanded chamber. To her astonishment, the image on the page began to move, the tree in the illustration growing, branching, developing leaves that shimmered with colour just like the real silver tree. Around the illustrated tree, other elements appeared, people gathering in a circle, animals moving through a forest, plants growing from seed to maturity, all in a continuous, flowing sequence that suggested the interconnected cycles of natural growth and community formation. As Alindra watched, transfixed, she gradually understood what the book, and perhaps the tree itself, was communicating. She had reached a transition point in her learning. The initial cycle of discovery and application was complete. She had not only absorbed the knowledge from the book, but had begun to implement it in practical ways that extended beyond her individual practice. Now she was being invited to expand her understanding even further, to explore the other books that surrounded her original text, to integrate their wisdom as well. With a sense of profound gratitude, Alindra placed her hand gently on her book, the first one, the one that had called her to the forest months ago. Its leather cover was warm beneath her palm, pulsing slightly with what felt like recognition. "Thank you," she said softly. "I understand." The fox, which had been sitting quietly nearby, watching the unfolding scene, now stood and stretched. It came to stand beside Alindra, leaning slightly against her leg in an unprecedented display of physical affection. She resisted the urge to reach down and stroke its russet fur, respecting its wild nature even in this moment of connection. Together, they looked at the array of books surrounding them. Each one, Alindra now understood, containing knowledge that built upon what she had already learned, expanding into new areas of understanding, new applications of the fundamental principles of transformation. There was too much to absorb in one visit, perhaps too much for one lifetime of study, but the books would wait, as the first one had waited, until the time was right for each revelation. For now, there was the wonder of this moment, standing in the heart of the silver tree with her fox companion, surrounded by ancient wisdom, feeling the pulse of connection to something vast and enduring. Alindra breathed deeply, taking in the slightly spicy scent of the chamber, feeling the cool earth beneath her feet, the gentle energy in the air around her, the quiet joy of discovering that her journey was both complete and just beginning. In the months and years that followed, Alindra continued her dual practice, studying the expanding collection of books within the silver tree and applying their wisdom in her daily life and work. The transformation that had begun in the village spread gradually to neighbouring communities, as visitors to Alindra's garden gatherings returned home with new ideas and perspectives, creating similar spaces for connection in their own locations. Alindra herself began to travel more widely, visiting these emerging centres of gentle change, offering guidance where it was requested, but mostly observing with quiet satisfaction as the principles she had learned took root in diverse soils and grew in ways appropriate to each unique environment. She was careful never to position herself as a leader or to claim special authority. The wisdom she shared belonged to the forest, to the silver tree, to the ancient knowledge contained in its books. She was merely a caretaker, a translator, a gardener tending the emergence of new growth. The fox remained her companion on these journeys, sometimes visible walking beside her on forest paths, sometimes an unseen presence she nevertheless felt watching over her. Occasionally, other animals would join them briefly, a pair of ravens that followed overhead for several days, a deer that walked parallel to their path through a series of meadows, a family of otters that playfully escorted them along a river journey. Alindra came to understand that these animal guides were part of the forest communication, its way of indicating approval and offering protection. As Alindra aged, her silver hair turning pure white, her hands becoming more gnarled though no less skillful, she began to wonder about succession, about who would continue to visit the silver tree, to study its books, to carry its wisdom into the world after she was gone. The fox, which didn't seem to age at all, sometimes brought other people to the edge of the clearing with the silver tree, introducing them to the site, though never leading them inside as it had done with Alindra. She would observe these potential successors from a distance, noting which ones approached the tree with reverence, which ones seemed attuned to its subtle energies. Sometimes, on her visits to the chamber within the tree, Alindra would find evidence that others had been there, a book left open to a particular page, a strange symbol traced in the earth of the floor, a small object left as an offering. She never attempted to discover who these visitors were, respecting their privacy, as she would have wished hers respected in the early days of her own exploration. The forest, she had learned, called to each seeker in its own way, in its own time. On what would prove to be her final visit to the silver tree, now leaning on a staff as she walked the familiar path with the ageless fox beside her, Elindra felt a deep sense of completion. The cycle that had begun with her first discovery of the book had come full circle. The knowledge she had gained had been integrated into her being, applied in the world, and passed on to others who would continue the work of gentle transformation. Inside the chamber, which seemed to adjust its size and illumination to her needs, as it always had, Elindra sat for a long time with her original book, its leather cover now bearing the marks of countless readings, its pages familiar as old friends. She didn't read this time, merely held the book in her lap, feeling its comforting weight, its subtle warmth, its living presence. "Thank you," she said eventually, speaking to the book, to the tree, to the forest itself, for everything you've shared, for everything you've taught me, for allowing me to be part of something so much larger than myself. The chamber seemed to brighten slightly in response, the walls pulsing once with increased luminosity. The fox, which had been dozing nearby, raised its head and looked at her with its bright knowing eyes. Elindra felt understood, acknowledged, blessed. With careful movements, she returned the book to its place on the central pedestal, her fingers lingering for a moment on its cover in a gesture of farewell. Then, leaning on her staff, she made her way out of the chamber, the fox walking close beside her, as if offering support. Outside, the clearing was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. The meadow grasses swayed gently in a warm breeze, creating waves of movement that rippled outward from the silver tree, like the expanding influence of the knowledge it contained. Elindra stood for a long moment, taking in the beauty of this place that had become so central to her life's journey, committing every detail to memory. Then, with a nod to the fox, she began the walk back toward the forest edge, toward her cottage, toward the simple daily life that had been transformed by her encounters with the extraordinary. Her steps were slow but steady, her breathing deep and even, her spirit peaceful. Whatever came next, for herself, for the silver tree, for the communities she had helped to nurture, she trusted the process of transformation to continue unfolding in its own perfect way. The fox stayed with her until she reached the edge of the forest, where the trees gave way to open fields, and the path led directly to her cottage garden. There, as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the animal paused. Elindra stopped as well, turning to face her longtime guide and companion. "Is this farewell?" she asked softly. The fox tilted its head, regarding her with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of the forest itself. Then, in a gesture she had seen only once before, it leaned forward and gently touched its nose to her hand. This time, the contact lingered, a moment of connection between two beings who had travelled long roads together. Then the fox turned and disappeared into the gathering shadows of the forest, a last flash of russet fur among the darkening trees. Elindra stood watching until she could see it no longer. She felt no sadness, only a deep gratitude for all that had been shared, all that had been experienced, all that had been transformed. With a sigh of contentment, she turned toward her cottage, its windows already glowing with welcoming light against the evening darkness. Each step took her closer to home, to the familiar comfort of her own space, to the peaceful rest she had earned through a life of patient attention and gentle transformation continued. The library of Alindra rests in perfect stillness now. Dust motes dance in the beams of sunlight that stream through the windows, illuminating shelves lined with books, jars of dried herbs, and curious instruments of brass and copper. The cottage is silent, yet it seems to hold the echo of her presence, in the arrangement of objects on her work table, in the faded writing on labels affixed to bottles, in the comfortable depression in the cushion of her reading chair. Outside, her garden continues to flourish, though now tended by different hands. Many of the plants she cultivated grow with particular vigour, as if responding to the memory of her care. The paths she walked daily remain clear, the stones worn smooth by years of her footsteps. At the garden's edge, facing the forbidden forest, stands a small bench where she often sat in the evenings, watching the play of light through the distant trees. Those who come to the garden now sometimes report a feeling of being watched, not in a threatening way, but with benevolent attention. Occasionally, visitors glimpse what appears to be a fox at the forest edge, its coat catching the sunlight with unusual brilliance. It never approaches, never allows itself to be clearly seen, yet its presence is felt like a blessing, a continuity, a reminder of connections that transcend ordinary understanding. In the village and beyond, the changes Alindra helped to initiate continue to unfold. The gatherings she began still take place, now organised by a rotating group of community members who understand the value of creating space for genuine connection. The principles she shared, of patient attention, of working with natural processes rather than against them, of recognising the inherent wisdom in systems, have been integrated into various aspects of community life, often in ways that those practicing them don't consciously connect to their original source. And deep in the heart of the forbidden forest, the silver tree still stands at the centre of its perfect clearing. Its leaves still shimmer with colours that shift between silver, blue and pale gold as they move in the breeze. Its roots still arch to form the entrance to the chamber within, where books of ancient wisdom wait for those ready to receive their knowledge. Sometimes, in the quietest hours of night, when the boundary between worlds grows thin, it's said that a figure can be seen walking the path to the silver tree, an elderly woman with white hair and graceful hands, accompanied by a russet fox. They move with the unhurried pace of those who know they have all the time they need. Their form substantial in one moment, translucent as morning mist the next. Their presence a reminder that some journeys continue beyond the visible world. For those with eyes to see and hearts to understand, Alindra's legacy is everywhere, in the balanced relationship between village and forest, in the respectful practice of those who study plants and their properties, in the gentle transformation of rigid patterns into more fluid, adaptable systems. The book of spells, she discovered, didn't change reality through dramatic magic, but through the subtler, deeper magic of perception, attention, and harmonious action. In this way, the true alchemy continues, the endless, beautiful process of transformation that is life itself. In this gentle turning of seasons, this patient unfolding of potential, this dance of form and essence, the eternal wisdom of the forest and its silver tree lives on, whispering to those who listen, guiding those who seek, blessing those who understand that the most profound changes often begin with the quietest discoveries. As you rest now, drifting towards a sleep, perhaps wisdom. This understanding that transformation is not always dramatic or obvious, that the most powerful magic often works through subtle shifts of awareness, that the potential for change exists within each moment, each breath, each heartbeat. Feel yourself held in this knowledge, supported by it, blessed by it. Allow your body to grow heavy and comfortable, surrendering to the natural wisdom that knows exactly how to transition from wakefulness to sleep. Your breathing becomes slower, deeper, more rhythmic, inhaling peace, exhaling any remaining tension. Your mind grows quieter, thoughts becoming more distant, less demanding of attention. The story of Alindra and the silver tree remains with you as a gentle presence, a reminder of possibilities, a whisper of magic that exists in the ordinary world when perceived with open awareness. As you continue to drift toward sleep, imagine yourself in that perfect clearing in the heart of the forest, resting on soft grass beneath the silver tree, held in absolute safety and peace. Let us return once more to the clearing with the silver tree. The grass is soft beneath you, cushioning your body perfectly. The air is still and warm, carrying the sweet scent of meadow flowers. Above, the leaves of the silver tree shimmer with their unique light, creating patterns of illumination and shadow that move slowly across your resting form. Your body feels wonderfully heavy now, each muscle relaxed, each joint at ease. There is no need to move, no need to do anything at all. You can simply be here, held in perfect comfort, supported completely. Your breathing has found its natural rhythm, deep, slow, peaceful. With each inhale, you draw in the tranquil energy of this magical place. With each exhale, you release anything that doesn't serve your perfect rest. Just as Alindra discovered the transformative power of patience and attention, you are discovering the transformative power of complete relaxation. Your conscious mind grows quieter, allowing deeper parts of yourself to emerge. The wisdom that exists beyond thought, the knowing that resides in stillness. The silver tree seems to pulse gently with life above you, its ancient presence a reminder of cycles larger than human understanding, of time moving in spirals rather than straight lines, of endings that are really beginnings in disguise. There is such peace in surrendering to these natural rhythms, in aligning your own cycles of wakefulness and sleep with the greater patterns of nature. Your breathing continues its gentle, regular rhythm. Inhale slowly, drawing calm energy deep into your body. Hold for just a moment, allowing this peaceful energy to spread to every cell. Exhale completely, releasing any remaining tension. Again, inhale peace and renewal. Hold briefly, exhale fully, letting go. Feel how your chest rises and falls with each breath, how your abdomen expands and contracts, how even your back presses slightly against the surface beneath you and then releases. This natural movement is like the waves of the ocean, the phases of the moon, the turning of seasons, a perfect rhythm that requires no conscious control, only your willing surrender. As your breath continues its peaceful pattern, notice how each exhalation takes you deeper into relaxation. Your body grows heavier, more settled, more at ease. Your mind becomes increasingly quiet, thoughts passing through like clouds in a vast sky, requiring no engagement, no response. You're entering the border realm between wakefulness and sleep, that magical threshold where transformation happens naturally, effortlessly. You are safe here. You are held in perfect peace. You can let go completely. Your body knows how to rest. Your mind knows how to quiet. Your spirit knows how to dream. Each breath takes you deeper. Each moment brings you closer to sleep. The silver tree watches over you. Its ancient wisdom surrounds you. Rest now.